What is going on, everyone? This is the Splash City Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Hartman, and today's episode is kind of a quick update on what's been going on throughout the summer. I've been a little bit less frequent on the episodes, so I wanted to just catch everyone up on some things maybe you haven't heard about and provide some updates in college basketball, Timberwolves, LeBron Watch, as well as just kind of give you a quick rundown of the Lynx latest win streak and where they currently stand amongst the elite in the WNBA. Before I get into content for today, just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying the podcast, I'd love for you to follow or subscribe on Spotify or Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just a quick note that I did update the YouTube channel to @Splash City Basketball Podcast. Took it off my personal channel to put it on just a channel specifically around the podcast. Don't need my kids' YouTube videos showing up in your basketball feed, that's for sure. And then also Splash City B-Ball Pod on TikTok is new as well. So again, love to hear your thoughts, comments. Appreciate you all listening. Appreciate you following the podcast wherever you prefer. Another quick programming note, really excited for the next few weeks because I'm going to do a fun series of episodes on positions. And I know we're moving towards positionless basketball, or we're already there, but I think a lot of people, a lot of fans still think about basketball in terms of point guards, shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, and centers. And so we'll break down what makes a great player at each position. We'll talk about the 5 best at that position from the state of Minnesota, and then the all-time 5 greatest. So really excited to kick that off with point guards, and then we'll go on down the line. But some fun content here as we wrap up summer. But first, let's get into the state of college basketball as it stands Wednesday, August 5th, 2026. All right, some of you may know about the latest injunction. The NCAA and some of the players have been battling it out in court. It's always about eligibility. It's always about transfer portals. But on July 31st, an injunction was granted forcing the NCAA to allow fifth-year eligibility for high school recruits who started in 2022-2023. So basically, this is the law that said 5 years, you get 5 years post high school to play 5 seasons of college athletics. So there's some impacts across the country. Here at home, one of the plaintiffs in the case was Cade Tyson, who led the Gophers in scoring last year, tested the NBA draft, didn't make a summer league team. The challenge with Minnesota, specifically as it pertains to Cade Tyson, if he's granted his 5th year, which it appears he will be, is they already have their roster capped at 15. And most college teams do. Most college teams have their roster set. There is a max cap of 15 players. And then even if Minnesota were in the mix, there's going to be a high NIL competition for Cade Tyson. Put up some big numbers last year, proved it in one of the best, if not the best conference in college basketball. So likely not coming back to Minnesota, but he could be in the mix to play another season. Looking at the broader college hoops landscape, there's kind of 2 approaches teams are taking at this point with their roster construction, and that's either heavy transfer portal or retention. Some teams going the retention route would be in Florida. Florida preserved their front court. They kept Thomas Houck. They kept Alex Condon. They kept Ruben Chinyelu. So they will have, again, probably for the 2nd straight year, the best front court in college basketball. And then they added Denzel Aberdeen from Kentucky. So Florida is kind of the top team going into next season just based on that experience alone. But there's some returning teams who had good runs in the NCAA tournament. Also, Illinois had a lot of retention. They were able to keep Mirkovic. They were able to keep Stojakovic and Tomislav Ivisic, Jake Davis, big role player for them. So Illinois has got a nice team coming back. They did add a transfer from Providence that should help. Their downside or their kryptonite this year will be similar to what it was last year, and that is really quick guards, maybe a little bit smaller that can get into the paint, get past their perimeter defense. Duke is another team whose retention was key. So Duke kept Petra Gungba, Caden Boozer returns, Caleb Foster returns, Dame Sarr returns. So Duke, a last second half court shot from Braden Mullins away from going to the Final Four. Duke returns most of that team, albeit without Cam Boozer, who was player of the year. UConn's another team that had good retention, keeping Silas Demery and Braden Mullins. So they'll look to reload with what they had, supplementing with a few guys here and there. The teams who kind of are going full portal swings, changing their roster. Kentucky is one. Mark Pope was able to land Milan Momcilovic, who is one of the top players in the transfer portal this year, who shot nearly 50% from three. So Kentucky kind of had to remake their roster a little bit. Louisville made arguably the biggest total splash in the portal. They grabbed Flory Badunga out of Kansas in the transfer portal. They were able to get Varo Fulgaris from Iowa, who hit the game winner against Florida in the NCAA tournament. And then they also got Jackson Shelstead from Oregon and Carter Knox from Arkansas. So Louisville went big in the portal. Most of their starting five will probably be transfer guys. And then lastly, Texas. Texas is another one. Made a nice run in the NCAA tournament. Lost a couple guys to the draft, to the NBA, but they brought in Mikey Lewis from St. Mary's, Amari Evans from Tennessee, to go along with Modest Vokietitis, who was the big 7-foot center in the middle. But the key for them might be David Punch from TCU. So rival TCU, David Punch coming over to Texas, going to Austin. TCU won a game in the NCAA tournament, and Punch is going to bring that physicality into Austin. So, there's some of the big teams. It's interesting the changes they're making. On their retention side, one of Purdue's strengths the last few years has been their consistency with Fletcher Lawyer and Braden Smith and Trey Coppin-Wren, and all those guys are gone for the first time in 5 years. So Matt Painter is going to have to rebuild that Purdue roster a little bit. So if you're looking, from the Gophers' perspective, I'd say in the Big Ten you got Illinois, Michigan State brings back Jeremy Fear, and most of their guards are back in East Lansing. They are replacing their front court, but Jackson Kohler is another one of those guys who was a senior last year, might have another year of eligibility. So if these players were able to put their name in the transfer portal in April, they still might get that fifth year playing, and Jackson Kohler would obviously bring a lot to Michigan State. So a lot of moving parts in college. I know that's one of the things that people don't love about college right now is the amount of turnover year after year. But there's kind of two schools of thought in college basketball and retention, and the teams that are retaining players. Minnesota is one of them, right? They bring back most of their scoring. Jalen Crocker Johnson, Isaac Osama, Bobby Durkin, Grayson Grove, Kai Shinholster. So they have 5 or 6 guys right there who played regularly big minutes for this team down the stretch. A team that was playing in the postseason. I know it wasn't the NCAA tournament or even the NIT, but they played postseason basketball. And then they were bringing over 2 guys from Michigan, familiar with the conference, and just supplementing kind of the core of what you got with a couple transfers here and there. And Malachi Palmer actually is another one that is interesting to me from Villanova. So nice role player, physical, big wing, could be kind of a 3-and-D maybe guy. But Minnesota went with the retention route of their core guys, and then you supplement with a couple guys here and there. But Minnesota brought in 3 freshmen as well. We'll see how much they play. And if you didn't catch it, I did have a hittingthehardwood.com/Gophers blog article about the 2027 commit the Gophers got from Isaiah Santos out of Texas. 6'5", powerful wing, reminds me a lot of David Roddy, former Breck player who ended up at Colorado State under Nico Medved. The other thing in college basketball, if you weren't aware that there's a new Pac-12, so Pac-12, the historic league with Oregon and UCLA, USC, Washington, Cal, Stanford got broken up. 2 of those teams went to the ACC. 4 of those teams went to the Big Ten. The new Pac-12 has formed, and it includes Gonzaga, San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, Fresno State, Texas State, Oregon State, and Washington State. So a lot of state schools there. That's a mouthful. kind of tough to see Gonzaga leave the West Coast Conference. Obviously, it makes sense. Gonzaga's kind of been had a stranglehold on that league for a long time, but gonna miss those Gonzaga St. Mary's Santa Clara matchups late at night on ESPN. But the West Coast Conference to replace Gonzaga is going to be adding Denver. So that's an interesting angle. Former Minnesota State Moorhead coach, Berge out there in Denver, he'll be moving to the West Coast Conference along with UC San Diego and UC Santa Barbara. So just, a little shake up there, but I think, interesting things, Colorado State again connected to Nico Medved. Another Minnesota player in that league is going to be Daniel Freitag. So last year he started at Buffalo. He moves out to Oregon State. So he'll be playing in that league. So that'll be interesting. And you got a couple guys from Minnesota on the Colorado State roster as well. So some things to keep an eye on as we move into the fall and we start getting into the college basketball training camp, quote unquote, early season practices. But again, teams are changing, players are changing, trying to keep you informed on all of that that's going on, so that once we tip off the games here late October, early November, we're ready to go. Next, let's talk about the Timberwolves, the Lynx, and some other updates happening around the professional ranks. The Timberwolves are moving over to a new streaming service for their partner for the TV. They will not be on any local, TV or cable TV. Even if you have a Comcast or DirecTV, you're not going to get them. You have to buy DAZN. They're starting to build up some sports teams, streaming rights. So a couple of good things, I think, with this. The DAZN deal obviously doesn't include nationally televised games. So the Wolves should get a handful of nationally televised games. Not sure. I haven't seen that number right now, but, typically they have Anthony Edwards. They have some star power. They'll get a Lakers game. They'll get a Thunder game. Maybe they'll get a Spurs game on national TV. And so if they take those, let's call it 5 games they might get on national TV. DAZN is actually going to give you 15 free games on that platform. And so, you get 15 free games plus the national games. You could probably watch close to 20 games without paying a dime for Timberwolves basketball. But if you're a diehard and you want to catch every game, you'll have to pay for that new streaming partner. Transitioning away from that regional sports network, MSC, FSN, Bally, FanDuel, whatever it was, we're moving away. We're full streaming now for the Timberwolves TV rights. Other Timberwolves news, obviously, I'm sure all of you know LeBron made his choice going to Philadelphia to play for the 76ers. He got a 2-year deal. I posted some of my thoughts on the socials, but just to expand on that a little bit, I'm curious in a lot of ways about this, partly because I don't think even with Embiid and LeBron playing 60-plus games, I still would probably give the Knicks a leg up. The East is an interesting conference. It's top to bottom might be better than the West for the first time in what feels like forever. And I think about teams like, the Pacers, right? They're getting Halliburton back. They still have Siakam. They're going to be better. The Magic took a step forward. If they can stay healthy, they're pretty good. The Pistons obviously were the top seed. The Cavs were the 4 seed. So I feel like the 76ers, regardless, it's going to be a tough stretch to go through the playoffs. And when you have 2 of your players that, LeBron's been healthy through the playoffs. He doesn't have a lot of injuries that time of year. But let's say he gets 50 games and Embiid plays 40 games. You're not going to be a top 2 seed in the East probably. And so now you're going on the road and it's going to be difficult. And, I don't think Embiid is up to playing 7 playoff games. At this point, I'd take Towns over Embiid. I'd probably take OG Anunoby over LeBron in a head-to-head matchup. So then it comes down to Tyrese Maxey and Brunson. You got to give the edge to Brunson. Now Jaylen Brown is obviously probably the best player on the Sixers team at this point and presents some matchups problems for the Knicks. But I don't know that I would give the edge to the Sixers in that series. So the East is going to be interesting, really fun to watch. It's going to get a lot of coverage, obviously. I don't know what this does to LeBron's legacy. Bringing a championship to Philadelphia, it's first since 1983. And that would obviously be a huge story. Does it change his legacy? I don't really think so. I mean, he's still probably top 3 player of all time, right? If he's not the top, I know a lot of young guys, young people choose LeBron. A lot of people my generation and older probably choose Jordan or Kareem or Magic or Bird or somebody like that. But personally, and because it's my podcast, you're getting my opinion. I don't love the ring chasing. It feels I don't want to say desperate because it's not. He doesn't need to prove anything, but it reminds me of the Gary Payton thing. Like at the end of your career, you go places to chase a ring, and LeBron doesn't need to do that. He's got his 4 rings, and so I don't really understand it. I guess he's earned the right. He's one of the probably 2 or 3 greatest players of all time. But I also just don't really enjoy him waiting, holding out for the whole summer, getting everybody to talk about it. Like, what's he gonna do? Where's he gonna go? And to me, it just kind of turns me off a little bit to him as a player. So my guy is always Jordan. As someone who played at one place his whole career, didn't leave. I just kind of appreciate that a little bit more. So I know it's a different world today than it was back then, but that's just my thought. As far as the Wolves, I mean, I don't think they ever really had a chance to get him. It never felt like that was a real possibility. I think from a basketball standpoint, Minnesota probably was as good a fit as Philly. Philly's a great fit. That's kind of what they needed was a playmaking 4-man, and LeBron is basically that at this age, at this stage of his career. But I mean, he would have worked perfectly with the Wolves. He wouldn't have had to be the main scorer. He wouldn't have had to be the main defender on inside or on the perimeter. So it made a lot of sense. It's just, I mean, let's be honest. We knew he wasn't going to come to this market. He probably doesn't want to be here. He wants to be where there's big media, there's big attention, which is, kind of what he's done his whole career. It's Miami, it's LA, now it's Philly, and it's like, all right, we get these big rivalries with the Knicks and the Celtics, and it's going to be all the hoopla, and that's what it feels like it's about. And so I just never really felt like the Wolves were there. I've also made this argument to a few people about the Wolves. There's this feeling like, do we need another big guy, a power forward, a true power forward? Nas isn't maybe the traditional power forward, but he's 6'10", and Julius is big, strong. But I'm looking at the Knicks, and like OG Anunoby, I wouldn't consider him a traditional power forward. He's 6'8", 6'9", more of like a power wing, as we call it. And so, the Spurs also didn't run that out there. They had Champagnie or Carter Bryant playing the 4. And even the Thunder with Chet, I wouldn't call him, overly physical. So could a guy like Jaden McDaniels or Terrence Shannon Jr. guard Chet? Absolutely. And would they have advantages offensively over Chet? Absolutely. So I don't know if that's just the way the league is going, where power forward isn't really a thing anymore. And you surround a center with shooting and spacing, and that's going to be the advantage you create. But that certainly feels like the way it's going. And so, like, in that regard, I'm not worried about the Wolves. Now, the challenge for the Wolves is going to be, what if Rudy goes down and you have one big on your roster, and that's Johan Berenger, who I'm expecting a much bigger role this year, 20 minutes a night maybe. But after watching Rocco Zikarsky, he's a fun personality. His social media stuff is fun, but he ain't going to hang in the NBA in meaningful minutes. And so the Wolves are pretty thin, at that point. So that's the worry for me. Rudy's been incredibly durable. You're hoping that can be the case again, and he can play 65 plus games. But any major injury to him, and you get real thin, real small, real fast, and rebounding is going to become an issue then. But moving on, let's move over to the Lynx. Just briefly talk about the Lynx, currently on a 10-game winning streak. just incredible, coming out of the All-Star break, looking as efficient as ever. It's funny because one of the things that Cheryl Reeves teams usually had was this just very suffocating defense. And right now they're winning with offense. I mean, they're putting up 100 points, 90 plus points almost every night. Part of that is personnel, right? Like Olivia Miles is going to push pace. She's going to find open players. And then Fee coming back, they're just able to score a lot of points. Kayla McBride can get hot. And now Nia Coffey's moved to the bench. So now you've bolstered your bench a little bit more. There's just a lot of optimism right now. I mean, this final stretch run is going to be them getting themselves in position to be the top seed. They're 3 games clear, I think, right now of second place as of this recording. It's kind of championship or bust. This team feels like they are dominating the league. And, once those playoffs hit, we'll see what kind of matchups they get. We'll see what kind of how physical the officials let those games get, because I know that's been a hot topic over the last few years. But this Lynx team feels like they're on a mission. I think they're probably a little bit upset about how the last 2 postseason runs ended, and they got some fresh young talent that is kind of taken them to another level. Last time we talked about Olivia Miles, it was Rookie of the Year. I want to stop and say, what about MVP candidate? Currently, she is slashing a 19.7 points, 4.7 rebounds, 5.8 assists, 1.3 steals, shooting 50% from the field and 38% from 3 on the league's best team. That feels borderline MVP-ish. And I think as we come down the stretch, barring a major setback, she's going to be in the conversation for WNBA MVP, as well as probably a unanimous Rookie of the Year at this point. So exciting stuff from the Lynx. We'll probably talk more about them as they hit the playoff run. Fun stuff there. Get over to Target Center and watch a Lynx game. All right, I teased this a little bit earlier. Upcoming 5-part series breaking down positions. What do you love about point guards? What do they got to have? What makes them great? Shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. Each episode we'll talk about that. I'll have a different guest for each one. And then we'll talk about the 5 best from the state of Minnesota. So we'll each have a list. And then we'll talk about the all-time greats at that position. So should be fun. Thinking it'll generate a little interest from folks. I'm trying to mix a little bit of the Metro with the outstate. I have a little bit of knowledge on both, but even just talking to friends, I've heard names that I didn't know about that they said, man, these guys were amazing. So excited to talk about that upcoming very soon. So make sure you check out that episode as well. Appreciate you listening to today's episode. We'll be coming to you shortly with that positional breakdown series. But until then, follow, subscribe, hit me up on social media, and just enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you all for listening. I'm Steve Hartman, and this has been the Splash City Basketball Podcast.